Awesome. Thank you, Lizzie. It's so nice to be here. Hi, everybody. I saw somebody from Denver. I'm down in Colorado Springs. So yeah, I love seeing Toronto. Oh, I lived in Vancouver for 15 years. Anyways, it's great to see where everybody's from. So I'm Rachel. I'm a teacher trainer. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm into education. I was the director of Teachers College and teacher management for yoga in Vancouver for like 9 years. So that's when I got into some serious curriculum building, because building a 200-hour is big and I wanted to do it better. So I went back to school and earned my master's in instructional systems and learning technology. Now, full disclosure, I was totally not going to go back to school and get a master's. I was going to do like online course certificate. I was like, I just want to know, how do we build online courses? Because really I could see that was happening more and more. And what happened is I took a few too many, maybe you guys can relate to this. I took a few too many classes where I was like, I love this teacher so much. Why is this online course so hard to take? So if you've taken an online course which didn't kind of keep your engagement or keep you motivated, or felt kind of confusing and disorganized or not quite so well structured, you know what I'm talking about. And I thought, well, I would really love to know how to do this well. And maybe I can get out there afterwards and help my fellow yogis do this better as well too. So that's kind of how I came to be where I am now. And today, we're going to cover we're going to go pretty quickly, everybody. And I want you to bring out like your notepads, your pieces of paper, because what we're going to do today is practical magic in terms of building your course. So by the end of this, you're going to have a clear idea, at least, of where you need to go. And you're going to have some of my best tools in your back pocket that you can take and run with. So yeah, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to share my screen with you because I have a pretty little PowerPoint and I have some handouts for you. So let me get that going. Good. I think you guys can now see my screen. Hold on. Let me just move my little face out of the way here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to throw this in the chat, you guys. It's a link. You can QR code your screen if you want, but I have a folder with some, oops, I want to go to everybody, hosts and panelists. Lizzie, did that go to everybody? The thing I threw in the chat? If it didn't, just repost it for me, because it says just host and panelists. So I'm not sure if I can share it with everyone. But this is a link to, thank you. So this is a link to there's a few different files in there. There's a handout. So if you are on a computer and have the ability to grab it and download it and want to, that's great. Otherwise, you can check out these resources later and just follow along for now. And just know that there's some good like course mapping stuff in there and things that hopefully will be useful to you practically. And so the skills and stuff that we're going to talk about today isn't just about this one course you're doing. This is kind of a methodology, a way of thinking that helps you get super clear and organized for any kind of course you want to create, whether it's yoga or something else. So what we're going to cover is how to think like an educator rather than an expert. So y'all are yogis, right? So we have a lot of expertise in yoga, but there's a slight shift in perspective we can make when we start to think like an educator rather than an expert. That kind of sets us up for success and our ability to transmit our knowledge and understanding to people. We'll talk about how you can structure, because that's the biggest thing with online is structure, right? So the biggest thing in online is that we're not there to put out fires in the moment and tell when people aren't with us. So when we're online, we have to do a really good job of mapping our course out really clearly in a way that, isn't quite as organic as that in-person stuff. So we'll talk about how you guys can do that. We'll do a little bit of a chat towards the end about tech and platforms and that kind of stuff. And then hopefully we'll have time for some questions. If you have questions as we go, please feel free to ask them. If they are relevant to what I'm talking about right in that moment, I'll answer it. If not, we will have time for a Q&A at the end, just in case it's a little outside the field of the narrative. We might hold off and save that for the end. All right. So hello, who are you? So I know where you're from. So what I would love to know from you guys is, where are you at with your online course creation? Is it just a gleam in your eye? Are you in the throes of it? Have you created one and are just looking to refine and improve what you've done? Throw it in the chat. I would love to hear from you guys. So vision just started. Great. An idea of the content, haven't started yet. Yay, just starting to create, gleam, refine, and improve. Awesome. Yep. So it's super new, looking to refine and improve. Want to refine, future project, ground zero. Yes. Yeah. Future, learning something new. Oh yeah. Hey, awesome, Lisa. Congrats. Angelina, fantastic. So I want to be super clear. Oh, Thomas, awesome. 200 hours are the best. Okay, started, but I'm not happy with it. Yes, I've created one. Okay, so let me be super clear that in terms of this particular presentation, what we're going to focus on is you creating an online course. So this is different than doing online classes for yoga, just so we know. Online classes via Zoom, live stream, things like that. That's awesome. And I have some resources on my blog to check that out if that's something you guys are interested in. But this is really good. Today we're going to focus on, like, you want to, you're like, I want to create a course on the chakras, or I love, the Bhagavad Gita, and I want to create an online course on the Bhagavad Gita. How do I do that? That's what today is going to answer. So great. Yeah, so this isn't so much about teaching yoga classes online, but creating a dedicated course. And this is really, what's really awesome about creating online courses is that it allows us to dive into our passion. It's an extension of who you are as a teacher, your brand, your vision, your mission. It's like when you think about the things that excite you about teaching yoga, like, wow, I love theming, or I love philosophy, or whoa, I'm super into the actions and the alignment. Eventually, over the course of your yoga career, creating an online course that speaks to your niche and gives something of value to your community can be a really great way, to work when you're not there. As you guys know, just to touch on business for a second, one of the challenges for us as yoga teachers until recently was that we are paid by the hour. We have to be there in person in order to basically give people the gift of what we do. But now that we can do things like pre-recorded classes, online courses could be a component of this, constellation of offerings you're creating. They can work for us when we're not there. We can offer value when we're not physically present. And for the sustainability and our sanity, this is very, very good news. So that's the piece that we're going to focus on today. All right. So the power of online. Yes, it's an awesome thing that we've got. I mean, COVID was bad, but we have new avenues now, at least, to reach people, which is great. We are now more of a global community than ever. So you can reinforce and deepen your current community and your connections with people, and you can reach beyond your time zone and connect with people from all over the world through your online offerings, which is amazing. So doing things like this, like your pre-recorded classes, your online courses, this helps extend your brand and your presence into the world. And that's really awesome. Okay, what this isn't about today, and I will be clear, I'm going to show you guys how to create a really excellent online course. It's going to be good. But it's not about marketing. It drives me crazy. Have you guys seen those things, which is like, I created a course in a weekend and have 1 million people. Okay. That's marketing. That is a different thing entirely. And those people got 1 million people sign up for the course because they spent $2 million on it. Probably, I'm just saying. So this is about the nuts and bolts of how do you create really good education. And guys, the stuff you learned today is also going to be helpful for you for your online classes, for your workshops, for your in-person teacher trainings, as well as for online stuff. Yes, Donald, save that till the end. Okay, so that's a good one. We'll hold on to that one. All right, so why online is different than being in person? Well, obviously, especially for my teacher trainers out there, you can't see people. So when poor little Bertha in the corner doesn't understand what you're talking about, if you're online, you cannot see that. So when I'm talking about online, I'm talking about pre-recorded courses. Online is a broad term, and that can mean we're on Zoom like this. That's kind of a different thing. That's sort of like being in person. I'm talking about your pre-recorded stuff where you create content, organize it, students go through it on their own. And maybe they have touch points with you, yes, but primarily they're working through this stuff solo. So we can't see them to know whether or not they're understanding that beautiful lecture we just did. So that's one of the challenges of online. Obviously, for us yogis, we can't touch people when we're online. So that's a challenge. And I want you to imagine your student. Yeah, Angelina, the focus here is self-directed, but I do have opinions about that, which I will share at the end. Okay. So your students, they have like a baby on one hip, cup of coffee on the other hand, they're fitting you into their lives. So when we bring people together in person, like for a teacher training or a workshop, they're a captive audience. But when they're online, they're fitting you in the morning, in the afternoon, when they've got 5 minutes. So we need to keep in mind that we have to be super clear about what we're teaching them and very effective. There's not a lot of room for tangents in the online world, my friends. We have to be like super efficient in our teaching. Also technology, you're going to have to work with technology. That's just sort of the way that it is. But the good news, yay, the good news is that great education is great education. You don't have to use fancy tech to make a great online course. You could make a great online course using YouTube and emails. So I just want you guys to know that when we start talking about online course creation, that doesn't mean that you have to go out and like buy a platform that costs you $100 a month. Okay. You can do it really simply and on a budget, and it can be an awesome, awesome experience. So tech is just a tool that we use, but the quality of your education is going to be really sustained by some of the principles we're going to talk about next, which is how to think like an educator rather than an expert. So some of you, I know you're in your 200s or you're just starting off, but eventually you will be, and there might be other things that you're experts in, but when we're thinking like an educator, we got to think a little differently. So we have to start with the end in mind. So this is what I call this. I'm going to introduce you to something called the great mistake. And I certainly made this when I created my first 200 hour. So the great mistake is assuming that the quality of my educational offering is based on what I tell my students, right? When I first created my 200 hour, I was so excited. I was like, I'm going to put everything in here. I'm going to put my entire brain into this 200 hour. It's going to be amazing. And it was just all about like giving them information. And that is not, as it turns out, the best way to educate someone. So when we're thinking like an educator, we need to turn that actually around. And what we think about is instead of it being about me, the presenter, instead, I turn it around and I make it about the student. What measurable thing can they do? Can they show me? Can they perform? Can they do at the end of this training that they could not do before? What can they do? And I make it super specific and super measurable. And by focusing on that, it clears away a lot of the drama of me trying to tell you everything I know, because that's not going to be effective. And it also puts the focus on it being student directed. So what can the student do? How can I increase their skills? How can it be measured and performed? In yoga, this is super important. Like a student could be able to recite an asana dictionary to me, but that's not going to mean they can get up and teach a class. For them to be a good teacher, they have to get up and teach. So it's a real simple switch, but it changes it from being focused on me to being focused on what can the student do. And just by changing that, it's going to like clarify what you're offering. So if you're offering courses on the chakras, let's say, for example, what's important at the end of the day? Do you want them to be able to do a meditation and access these centers? Do you want them to be able to describe these centers to someone else? Do you want them to be able to lead meditations to other people using the chakras? Do you want them to be able to, describe the history of them? So it changes what we really want to focus on. And that way we can get super clear as teachers. All right. So one thing that we can do, and I'm going to show you my handouts, but feel free to journal this, is that I want you to imagine for a moment your course. So the Gleam in Your Eye course, choose one of the courses you're working on. If you don't have any idea, you just pick a subject, something you know about that you'd like to teach. Could be building a bike, anything. And I want you to, we're just going to use this as our template for our work today. And I want you to start with the end in mind. So if somebody took your course, your online course, in 2 years, what would they remember about it? What would be the big picture thing? What do you want them to remember in 2 years? And this is kind of what we call the big idea, starting with the end in mind. And this is useful for us because as educators, we're going to get into the weeds a little bit. So this is like a North Star. It's like the big picture idea. So take a moment, everybody. And for a course that you actually have or a course out of your imagination right now, I'd like you to think about that. What do you want students to remember about your course in 2 years? If you feel so inspired, you can put it into the chat. Otherwise, you could just write it down. I'm going to give everybody just a few moments to do that. Angelina, that is powerful. Your students can get that. Rosemary, beautiful. Yeah, Carl, that's it. That's right. Okay, so with that in mind, now we're going to talk a little bit about thinking like an educator and focusing on performance. So now that we kind of have the big picture in mind, and feel free to keep mulling that over, but how do we really make this specific? What are the tools? Yeah, that's right, Lisa. I love that. So the tools that we use are learning objectives. Now, I know y'all have heard of learning objectives. By the end of this lesson, students will be able to blah, 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 right? But learning objectives, actually, there's a little bit of magic in them. And when we do them really, really, really well, your course will write itself. So here's the thing about learning objectives. So here would be, I'll give you an example. An effective learning objective describes the intended performance outcome of the experience. And they provide really measurable and specific benchmarks for what students need to do in order to be successful, in order to be like, yes, you got this course, you did it. An ineffective learning objective would be something like, students will know how to teach yoga. That would be an ineffective learning objective. It's a good intention. The intention there is really good. I'm running a teacher training. I want my students to be able to teach yoga. Yes. But a very common error in learning objectives is to write something like know or understand. I want my students to understand the risk factors of Warrior 2. Well, I can't go in their head and look and see if they know it. So we need to change those verbs to something that is more measurable. Students will describe 5 risk factors for each of these asana. All of a sudden, I've gone from knowing about misalignments to being able to do something that is super, super specific. And I'll be honest with you guys, taking the time to write really good learning objectives, it's time consuming and it's a little challenging. And it actually takes more time than you think. But when you spend that time in the beginning, it makes the rest of your course creation very clear and very efficient. Okay, so a better learning objective would be to focus on something measurable. So instead of saying, okay, I want my students to know how to teach yoga, which is like the right intention, but I might say, okay, students will be able to teach Warrior 2. That's what I really want, right? I want them to be able to teach something. I don't want them to know how to teach. I want them to teach. So students will teach Warrior 2. And so one way you can test your learning objectives is to ask, can I measure it? Is there a way for me to actually see them do that? And if it's something cognitive, like they're going to know all of the elements associated with the chakras, you might say students will be able to describe each of the elements associated with the chakras. That's measurable. I can see that happening rather than they're going to know it or they're going to understand it. Right? So I know it's a small switch, but it's an important one. So a really, really good learning objective, and we're going to dive into the learning objective weeds here a little bit, because a really, really good learning objective has 3 parts to it. So the first part is a description of what the student's going to do. It's their what. They're going to teach Warrior 2. Okay, but that's not enough because I'm like, okay, so let's just say, I'm going to take this off, like imagine I'm in a teacher training and the student's going to teach Warrior 2. Well, how do I know if they've done it well enough? Right? Is it enough that they teach it and it's really bad? They just did it? No, I need to have some sort of criteria for evaluating that performance. I need to have some standards. So that's what the criteria is. So that would be, okay, a student's going to teach Warrior 2 using direct language, speaking from the ground up, and cueing to at least one common misalignment, right? So instead of, we went from students are going to know how to teach yoga, the students are going to teach Warrior 2 using direct language, speaking from the ground up, and cueing to one common misalignment. All of a sudden, that is really clear, right? Not only do I know what they need to do, but the student's going to know what they need to do. They know that they have to incorporate those few things in order for it to be successful. So all of a sudden we got more specific. How many of you took a teacher training and had a practicum where teachers just kind of gave you some notes, like on how it went. They're like, that was pretty good. That was good teaching. Now, no fault to the teachers, but what we actually need to do is get super specific about what those standards are, what constitutes good teaching, what constitutes success in your course, right? And it's not about grading them, but it's about making sure that you are delivering the information in a way that is understandable and digestible to your students. All right. So, okay. So we have the description, we have the criteria, which is our standards. Well, how well do they have to do it in order for it to be successful? And then we also want to include the conditions. Under what circumstances are they doing it? Is a student teaching Warrior 2 to a partner? Are they teaching it to a group of 10 people online? Are they teaching it to a class of 30 people? That really changes the environment of that learning, really is different for each of those scenarios. So as educators, if we can get really specific about our learning objectives and make them this clear, then again, the rest of the course is going to write itself. So if I'm going to put all of those three things together in my little scenario here, students will be able to teach Warrior 2 in a virtual classroom, directly addressing the camera to at least 5 students, using direct language, teaching from the ground up, and giving and teaching to 1 common misalignment. Bam! Now everybody is really clear on what needs to happen and what the student needs to be able to know. It's become tangible, specific, and measurable. So what I want you all to do is to look at this online course map. And for your whole course, like think about your online course as a whole, whatever it might be. And I want you to try to create a couple of these learning objectives using those 3 parts. So what are they going to do? How well do they have to do it? And what are the conditions under which they are doing the thing? So again, for your whole course. So give it a try. If you find yourself using the word know, they know something or they understand, see if you can make it into something measurable. Remember, we're not describing how they're learning. We're not describing students will watch a lecture and blah, blah, blah. We're describing what the student can do as a result of all those activities that you did. What's the end result? The full screen PowerPoint. You know what? I'm actually not sure that I can. I think I'm in full screen. So I think that's what we got. But if you go to those, if you go to the downloads, there is an empty course map in there that you could take a look at and make it as big as you need to, because I know the letters here are a little tiny, right? Thanks, Lizzie. And if somebody wants to put a learning objective, participants will be able to clearly articulate their core values and how they impact their life. Angelina, that is on track. So they're able to articulate their core values. So that's the description of what they're going to do. Now, could you make that more specific? They will be able to identify 5 to 6 of their core values. Like you might want to, like, how many would make it right? So we might say, what is the criteria for that? Articulate their values and how they impact their life. Again, you might get specific about that and how they impact their this, and this in their life. So it's, again, you just might want to firm up the criteria for that in terms of saying, like, how specific do they need to be? How much information do they have to get? How much, like, which parts of their life are they actually pointing to? Just to make it a little bit, just so it's a little bit more specific about what the standards are, right? Yeah. Anyone else want to put one in there? I know I'm catching a lot of you on the fly when it's a gleam in your eyes, so you might need to just take this and digest it a little bit before you're able to come up with learning objectives. But that's where most of us, and Angelina, thank you very much for sharing that. That's where a lot of us will kind of miss a little bit, is the standards. How well do they have to do it? So thinking about it being specific, like if you're, okay, say I'm teaching a yoga teacher training and I we'll be great. Jojo, great. We'll be able to sequence a children's yoga class. I might say like, how long is that yoga class? How do you know that they've done it? Like I could write a sequence for a children's yoga class. It could be terrible. So what are the standards? And it would be terrible. So you could write in some standards there. Like even Jojo, sometimes it is according to the methodology of this program, including the 5 principles of teaching children's yoga, including like using peak pose methodology, including the 4 parts of class, so you might just want to get a little bit more specific about how you know that they did it successfully. Cool. Zethan, that's fun. Participants will be able to use blankets or a bolster to adapt poses to create more length in their spines. Great. You might say specific, if it's restorative poses or any poses, that could be a place to be a little bit more specific. And I might just say they're going to demonstrate the use of that too, right? They will demonstrate using a bolster or a blanket to adapt a pose to create more length in their spines. I like the word demonstrate because it means people have to do something. Yeah. Right. So here's, so learning, you guys are totally on the right track. And so as you start to think about it, I think a good way for us to keep ourselves accountable to that standard piece is to just go, how do I know if they've done it well enough? Right. Because again, like, and Zethan, we might put in just effectively, like even the word effectively, to effectively create length in their spines, just so it's kind of like they're successful at doing it. We want to just make sure that we're including those standards so we know, yes, they got it right. So it's kind of moving us from the students will describe the chakras. It's like, well, students will describe the chakras accurately and include this, and this in that thing. Yeah. Good, good, good. Nice, you guys. These are great. Okay. All right. So this is something to do. I'll give you a rough guide. Okay. For any course, really, you probably want like around 5 learning objectives, probably around 5. Even if it's a 200-hour teacher training, you want 5 because you want them to be, if it's for a big 200-hour teacher training, obviously those are going to be bigger. They're going to be more broad. Students will be able to effectively teach a hatha and a vinyasa yoga class for an all levels class, blah, 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 according to peak pose methodology. It'll be a big learning objective, but around 5. If you have any more than that, it's getting a little too in the weeds. And if you don't have enough of those, then you might not have a whole course. So about 5, but then we break down and we kind of dig a little deeper. So one thing that I want to bring up that's an instructional design principle is something called alignment. So alignment means that, I'll read you the quote, critical course components, learning objectives, assessments, instructional materials, learning activities, and course technology reinforce one another to ensure that learners achieve the desired learning outcomes. In a nutshell, your course all works together to work towards your stated goals. So that means for many of us, and I know I have this problem, I want to give students so much information. And in order to create an effective course, you got to actually, sometimes it's about what you don't include. Sometimes there's a level 2, everybody. We need to be really clear. Too much information can lead to overwhelm. And often I've seen this when we create online courses, sometimes we just want to put everything in there. And we actually have to be really strategic about what we don't include in order to focus on the most important things. Also, it means that our assessments, let's talk about assessments for a minute. Assessment, it's scary. It brings up the 4th grade, but assessments really aren't about grading when we're talking about adult learners. It's more about us going like, was this effective? Was the learning that I gave effective? Was all the activities, the course components, did that get me from A to Z? Now, you can have different kinds of assessments. We have what we call a summative assessment, which is basically at the end. So at the end of your program, you have kind of the big project or the big thing that the students do to demonstrate that they pulled it all together. But along the way, we also have, formative assessments, little assessments along the way that, are ways of us checking in. Now, assessments become really important in online because we have to include assessments so that we keep students and know they're on the right track. But if you've written an effective learning objective, your assessment writes itself. If my learning objective is students will be able to teach Warrior 2 in a virtual class environment to 5 people using direct language teaching from the ground up and teaching to one common misalignment, then the assessment that I'm going to use is they're going to teach to an online crew, and they're going to teach Warrior 2, and they're going to include those steps, right? So they're like bookends. Your learning objectives and your assessments are like they're like little romantic partners. So they match each other. They're bookends to your course, and they should really be the same. So if you create your learning objectives and your assessment should mirror each other. So that's something good for us to know, because in instructional design, this is what we do. We create our learning objectives for the course, then we create the assessments. You don't do anything in between first. You create the assessments. So if you know that you want your students to be able to demonstrate use of props to make poses more accessible or more inclusive, then you know what your assessment is. Students are going to teach a 20-minute class in which they, teach 5 poses and use these props effectively to address the following things, right? That you know what your assessment is going to be. So if you get to your assessment, you're like, oh, we're doing a multiple choice test on this, and it's not related to your learning objectives, that's your warning sign as an educator. We always want to test people on what we're actually teaching them. I know that's really obvious, but trust me, I had a chemistry class in high school that did not do that, and I was a very sad student and very demoralized. So that's what we do. We create this, and then we create the assessments. So just think about your learning objective, and then consider, based on your learning objective, which is now beautifully specific, what would be the assessment that goes with that? And then again, they kind of write themselves, right? Like if they need to, you want them to sequence a kid's yoga class, well, that definitely tells you what their assessment is. But now that you know what the standards are, when you do your assessment, you will assess them to those standards, right? Really specific standards that you set out from the beginning. Now, I do want to talk here pragmatically a little bit about assessments and online. So when you're running an online course, and I'll just let the cat out of the bag now and tell you that I am not a fan of evergreen courses that you just put out there and you expect people to take on their own completely. I'm not a fan. I don't think it's good education. I don't think it connects you with, well, it can, I shouldn't say that. It can be actually great education, but it requires a very particular kind of student to be able to do that. A certain kind of motivation and time ability to do that kind of thing. But I think that the opportunity to put yourself in the course and to give personalized feedback to your students and to create a community, which we all so need and love, it's much better served when you have a bunch of online content, but then you also combine that with, say, a weekly meeting with you and the group to like give more personalized feedback, higher level feedback on assessments and things like that, and connect people to each other. So I'm just gonna, there's some practical reasons to that. I like that too, and we can talk about that more at the end. Even though this isn't a marketing course, I do have opinions, which we can talk about. Yeah, so, but I will say, so online, if students are going to be taking assessments by themselves, the easiest ones to do without you stepping in, because we do want to preserve your time too. That's one of the reasons we're doing this whole online thing. Multiple choice assessment questions, they can be self-graded, and it's easy. And you can true and false, selecting right responses sometimes, depending on if you're using a technology platform. Sometimes the quizzes have more or less capabilities. But those are things where, again, the students can go through an assessment process that you don't have to put your hands in, right? So it can happen automatically, which can preserve your time for higher level feedback in person, which I like. So I'm a big fan of it's less about quizzing them and more about putting like almost reviews. It's like a review to make sure you got the key ideas on this chunk of content that you're going to do in your online course. So, there's a blend. The more you step in, and this kind of goes to the pricing question, but in my opinion, if you have an online course and you don't touch it, students just do it on their own and you don't think about it, that's kind of a lower price point, right? As soon as you get involved and we're paying for your time, that price point goes up because now I'm paying you for your time, faculty, to be present. But there's a lot more value there because here you are giving personalized feedback, creating community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, just to kind of give you an idea, I would obviously charge more if I, as the faculty, we're going to be an intrinsic part of the program on a regular basis. All right. So assessments, I'm going to leave this just because I want us to have time to kind of move through some of these other things, but I think you get the idea of how you would base your assessments on your objectives. Okay, so now take a deep breath, because once you've written your learning objectives and your assessments, friends, you've basically written your course, which is amazing. Now we just got to fill in the blanks in between. So in your handout folder, there is a course map. This is awesome. And it goes by modules. So when you are doing something online, you're generally going to run, it could be, you could call it weekly modules, weekly topics, weekly lessons, something like that. I think in terms of weeks, because I think in terms of how much work students are going to have to do. But you're going to have basically topics. And okay, I'm just going to give the chakra example. Say you're doing an online course on the chakras. Yay. And you're like, I want an introductory module, which is about the history of the chakras and stuff. And then I'm going to have a module for each chakra. That would be a logical kind of progression. Maybe I'll have one more module at the end for, I don't know, pulling it all together or something like that. So each of my modules now is going to have its own little baby learning objectives. So these are tiny little objectives that feed into the big course level learning objectives. And you should be able to map it out and be like, this one feeds into that one. This one feeds into that one. So let me give you an example. Say I want, at the end of my chakra course, I want my students, I want them to be able to create a yoga class designed to address a deficiency. This is a little modern psychology, but to address a deficiency in that chakra, they have to design a course. Well, there's a lot of learning that goes into the ability to do that, right? First, I have to understand all the chakras. I have to understand what it means for them to be deficient. I have to know what poses and postures and pranayama techniques would go to addressing that. So all of these little learning objectives would feed into that big final, big course learning objective. So you would basically repeat for each of your modules and each of your topics, you would repeat what you did with your learning objectives above, but this time it's just for this module. So if I'm doing a chakra course, I might say students will be able to demonstrate the location of this chakra in their body. Students will be able to discuss through the modern psychology lens, what an efficient, like 5 qualities of a deficient chakra and 5 qualities of an excessive chakra. Students will be able to identify 5 yoga poses that would support a deficient quality of energy in this chakra, right? So all of those things you can see would go to feed my big course learning objective. So that's what you do. You break it down. And then we think, okay, now I've got the beginning of this module and the end of the module. You think it's like a little baby course. It's like, what's the beginning? What's the end? How am I going to assess the students on this? They're going to take a multiple choice quiz that, runs them through Muladhara and asks them all sorts of questions about it. And then what do I have to give them? Am I doing a lecture where I discuss it? Are we doing a practice where we feel it? Are they reading something? So in the middle here on this sheet are the inputs. What are the activities that students are going to do in order to get this material and understand it? And so that's how you can kind of map out your course, and you make sure, again, that everything is in alignment. So if I'm giving a lecture, that lecture relates to my learning objective, which relates to my assessment. So there's no extraneous info, right? Now, that said, y'all, you can put a little extra resources or further studies, and you can put in a couple of extra things for people, but make sure it's extra. Like, because I don't know, if you were like me, you want to give so much, right? So hold it back. Okay. So, activities, I think I have a whole list of activities in your handout you guys can check out. Some activities are going to be, if you want students to demonstrate and do something, well, then you better start having them demonstrate and do something during the course. There's different kinds of learning objectives. Some learning objectives are just ones that are kind of in our head. It's where we need to relay information. Like students will be able to describe the elements related to the chakra. Whereas, students will demonstrate 5 poses that help to increase the, energy of this element in the body. So there would be different kinds of assessments based on what you need them to do. All right. Yeah, and I have some tricks for that. One thing that I like to do, because I have a teacher training that's online, and you want them to do some higher level stuff. I don't want them to just be taking multiple choice quizzes all the time. So sometimes what I'll have them do is do an exercise or do an activity or a worksheet. And then in my next video, as the teacher, I'll go through that worksheet and break it down and discuss what's right and wrong. And I'll talk about it or what I came up with so that they're doing an activity and then they have me talking about it, but it's still all online, right? So that's a way you could also make some assessments for your students that aren't necessarily multiple choice quizzes. All right, so for your homework, you guys know what you're going to do. You're going to go and you're going to create a course map, which has your topics and your module objectives and your activities and your assessments. Yeah, like feedback videos. I'm not talking about them submitting a video. I'm more talking about like I had a anatomy of the hip class, right? And so I would be like, what are 5 poses that stretch the hip flexors? Like, this is a question for them to figure out. And then in the next little topic, I actually walk them through the answers. I'm like, hey guys, okay, so you just were asked to think about these 4 things. So let's walk through the most common ones. And I'd be like, this is the lunge, this is why, and I would demonstrate it. So it's a way of being able to give feedback in the course without giving feedback, without you having to show up and do it in person. Yeah. Okay. So alignment from start to finish. And so be willing to toss the dead weight on your course. And it's not dead weight. Of course, it's precious, amazing material, but be willing to be streamlined for the sake of being clear. All right. Okay. So that's the theory. So you guys, for homework, go away, map out your courses. Really try to be super clear on those learning objectives. Again, the learning objectives are what's going to take you the longest. The inside of it, creating the handouts and creating the videos and stuff like that, that all becomes super easy once you know exactly what you're teaching. The course map will take you a long time, but once you create that course map, that's like having your course in hand. Because I'll tell you what, it sucks to create videos and then have to go back and recreate them. So if you have a really good course map from the start, plan it out. Because then also for you as an educator, you might have a way that you're used to teaching a certain topic. You might. But by making a course map, you might find really new and interesting ways to teach that material, and it'll help you refine what you're doing. So I'm the kind of person, I just love to jump in and do it. I don't want to make a course map. This is true. I don't want to like plan, but I have learned the hard way that creating this plan, yes, it's smarter, not harder. It makes it so easy and fast when you're creating your materials to create them, and they're all like, you don't have to go back and re-edit everything. It saves you so much time to do the course map in advance. Okay, so let's talk about copyright. Let's just talk about some like little kind of technical things. Copyright best practices. You create it, you own it. Yay! Don't pull images off the web. No, only pull images off of royalty-free images like Unsplash or Pixabay or Wikimedia. Make sure to attribute pictures if you're using them. Like you can pull, there's so many good graphics now on like Wikipedia. I've used a bunch of their anatomy stuff, but oftentimes it's a license where you need to share and attribute where you got that image from. So you guys just follow the best practices for those kinds of things, attribute where you need to. You could always hire an illustrator to create illustrations and graphics for you. But yeah, it's like, it's so easy to copy paste things off the web. So I'd say let's not do that, right? Because we don't want people to copy paste our stuff. Yes, so that's just a little brief public service announcement, because you also don't want to create this beautiful manual or handout and then have to totally recreate it, right, with afresh. So do it right from the beginning. Tools and platforms. So you guys have you might, if you've started to dip your toes into the online course world, you might have heard about a couple of these. So I include the Pony Express here to remind us all that the first distance learning courses were done by Pony Express. People were doing distance learning correspondence courses 150 years ago through the mail. Yay! So we've been into this for a long time. So you don't have to use crazy tech in order to create a really nice online course experience that's automated. Again, you can do that through automatic emails and through a private YouTube channel. You could totally do it that way. That said, there are some course platforms out there that do help to make your life a little easier for us entrepreneurs. And I will say the main thing that they do, and here's a few of them. The main thing that they do is integrate payment information, okay? and registrations and track course progress and give you certain controls over things like students have to watch 80% of the video for it to count as complete, things like that. So in the upper left-hand corner, there's Canvas. This is what I worked with this in grad schools when I was helping to convert, helping faculty to convert courses to online platforms. They all use Canvas, guys, or Blackboard. Some of you might have encountered. Canvas is actually free. You can use it as an educator, and it's got tons of bells and whistles. There are some limitations to using it, and one of the biggest ones is that it is not about business. It does not take payments, does not, track your student. It tracks their progress, but it doesn't track like it's not like a business oriented one where you can send out like emails to everybody or do discount codes or take payments or do payment plans. And if you're going to create a few online courses, that's like the big thing is the ability to automate that kind of payment stuff, right? So you're not doing it manually. Yes, you could have a course out there on Canvas and you could take people into PayPal and you could enroll them manually. But part of what we're doing here is making it easier on you to not have to work so hard, right? So these other ones, I use Thinkific. They're located in Vancouver. Teachable and Thinkific are very similar. Hey Marvelous, actually, I don't think it's called Hey Marvelous anymore. I think they changed their name. I can't remember what they are now. Kajabi, my partner works in Kajabi, so I'm very familiar with Kajabi. I've done a lot of coursework for him. And so these are kind of integrated platforms that will keep mailing lists for you. They do things to a different degree, better or worse. I like Thinkific. It's solid. It does what I need it to do. But there's a ton out there. Udemy, you can also put your courses on third-party platforms, right? So you could put them out there and I think Udemy is like this. I can't quite remember, but you build your course on their platform and then they kind of market it to their people, right? And you get a very small percentage. That is, thanks, Donald. So that is nice. But honestly, my desire for you, maybe you do that for one course as a marketing thing. My desire for you is for all of your content to be in your control, under your website, under your umbrella. That would be from a business perspective. I don't want you putting your courses out there on someone else's platform. I want them on your platform because they are a lot to create. And I want you to reap the benefits of that and for it to support your brand and not someone else's. Anyways, there's a whole thing on these that we could go through. Lots of pros and cons to all of them, but check them out. You can kick the tires. A lot of them have free trials. You can even create a course in them. Just sort of see what you think. Woohoo! Celebrate your sparkle, everybody. So good. This is good. We have some time for some Q&A. This is me. I run a course every so often called How to Create Your Online Course. It's a 6-week course. It's all nuts and bolts all from the beginning, and we meet and we talk and you get personalized feedback on all your stuff. But it's basically this content, but just a lot depthier. And that's my website. Find me on Instagram, say hello, reach out for questions. I do this thing where I do, Jennifer, you just made my day. Thank you. I do offer 15-minute virtual coffee chats. I'm super happy to meet with anybody, and we have virtual coffee and you can ask me questions if you want to. So that's on my website as well. So hit me up. Maybe we'll just go questions and things. Lizzie, you have stuff you want to say?
Yeah, I can jump in here. There was a question from Donald earlier in the webinar. Let me just grab it. Donald asks pricing strategy and refund policy. And that's kind of one question. So we can answer.
Sure.
And it didn't really explain it. Kind of was just saying pricing strategy and refund policy. What's your insights?
Yeah, okay, so some of your, and also access, because he was like a year or, thanks, Andy. It was asking like for a year or forever. Well, a lot of people are doing forever, but forever means the life of your business. It doesn't mean forever. Okay, so you're not obligated. I think if you close your business and retire, that it's, you just, everybody take whatever, download what you got, and take it off. So I don't necessarily like to obligate someone into lifetime. And also it'll depend on your platform. So some platforms you use will charge you per user, active user. Like Thinkific their plans have changed. I'm not sure. But so if that's the case, you may not want to give lifetime access because then your active users are going to be high. Also, I think there is something to the fact that when people have a limited access, they actually take the course. Sometimes you can get people, it's like, if you don't have a time frame, this is another reason I want you to curate your courses and and meet them every week and create a cohort and do it together, is because it's a much better marketing strategy to have a start date for your course. If your course is just out there and you're like, take it anytime, people will never take it. Like a couple will, but people won't. And it's not because they don't love you, it's because they have too much going on. And so if there's not a time deadline, they don't make the time to commit to that for themselves. But if there's a time deadline, they're like, oh, I can do this, I can carve this out in my life, and then they'll take it. So that's one of the reasons, at least I found that in my courses. I'm much more a fan of the start date and the end date, where you can have some pop-ins and connect with people. Because that way you also have a cohort of people who can work together. You can create peer-to-peer interaction where they can share what they're doing with each other. And that's so nice because it's community and they get support, and then they're more motivated to stay in too. So that's why I tend to lean towards that. Pricing is really tricky. So I tend to price based on what my time is, to be honest with you. Once I've created an online course, I value the course. It's great. Yay. But really what I'm charging for is my time. So I evaluate it based on that. Like I'd say like, okay, I run the sequencing mentorship course, which is awesome. It's like they get asynchronous content every week and then 2 classes live with me a week to do the actual sequence, right? And then once a month we have meetings. When I'm thinking about how I'm pricing that course, I'm thinking about how much of my time am I actually using real time. I'm not really thinking about the months of work I put into the course, even though that was a lot, So I want you to make sure that you're getting paid in a way that feels good for you. So it really varies. Really varies.
Awesome.
Oh, thanks, Dana. I will check that out. I will check out why that is. I think I might have turned the form off. I will turn it back on.
No worries. We'll send it out again.
Yeah.
And so you'll have some time to fix that. No worries.
Stop the share.
No other questions, really. You were hopping in the chat every time, and I was like, oh, there goes another question for the end. So yeah, we'll just wrap it up. Definitely make sure everyone check out Rachel's website, her courses, those 5 free links and things like that. We'll send the recording out tomorrow afternoon via email, so that'll be coming from me. And make sure to send it out to people that you love and, share the knowledge. And that's kind of what we're here for. So thank you again, Rachel, so much for being here today, and hope to have you on again sometime soon.
My pleasure. And I turned that form back on, so you should be able to get to it now.
Amazing.
Thank you, guys. So nice to meet you.
So quick. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.